What is up, you radical human? Welcome back to the show. I have a fun one for you today as I sat with Bear Handlon, the CEO and founder of Born Primitive. This is an uncompromising man with an uncompromising business, a proud American and patriot, a former Navy SEAL. We talk about what buds training is really like, competing at the CrossFit Games, going from the SEALs to the role of CEO and father. We talk about his recent trip down to Jamaica where he sat with psilocybin mushrooms in a healing ceremony and how that was so profound for him and potentially for the veteran community or anybody that's looking to grow. We talk about why his company has paid off $11 million in veteran medical debt. And we talk about why, when life gets really hard, you should focus on helping others and so much more. This is a fun and radical conversation. Bear's the man. Let's get into it. Bear Handlon, you are the all-American man, my brother. You're sitting right now. I must admit, I'm a bit disappointed that the luscious locks have been trimmed down a little bit. I hope you don't lose all of your special powers. But the American flag, the vibe, the Constitution on your arm, you're a proud patriot, and I love that. Because obviously, if you're picking up from my accent, I grew up in England, but I love America now, everything that it stands for, the ideals of America. And I want to kick this one off maybe a little bit out of left field, but what's going on culturally right now? What's going on the West Coast with these riots and stuff? As a patriot, as a former SEAL, what does it make you feel when you see stuff like that going on our own soil?
Well, it definitely fires me up, and I acknowledge it is a fairly complicated issue, so I don't want to downplay that. But I think the thing that really fires me up is it seems that the theme in these sorts of instances, if you're watching people's cell phone videos and all these things that get posted online, is the only flags you see are the ones that aren't of our country, right? We've seen this in some similar protests in response to what happened in Israel and what's ongoing there, which also is a very complex issue. But I just, to be blunt, I feel like there's a lot of people in this country that are not very grateful, and they take for granted how good we have it. I would guess you could call it luxury, if you want to put it that way, of spending a lot of time in other countries with my old job. And one good thing that provided to me was context. And I tell you what, as a service member, and most can relate to this that have done it, there's not a better feeling than when you step your feet back on American soil. And it makes you realize how good we have it. I spent some time in the Middle East. That was a great experience for me in seeing how other cultures do things and also how good we have it here in America. So I especially when I see a bunch of people that have iPhones and air conditioning and all the modern comforts acting like they're victims and not showing appreciation for the generations that have gone before us and died for this country and died for the flag, that fires me up. I just think, in the case in LA, it's ironic that I see a bunch of Mexican flags. And it's like, well, you're in the United States. So if you love Mexico so much, why are you here? You know what I mean? Why are you burning the American flag? Literally, that was happening last night. When you still want to stay here, like it just doesn't add up, and that does not now permit you. I saw a guy was taking a sledgehammer to a curb and handing out these little boulders so people could throw them over the overpass at cop cars. You know what I mean? So for the people that are under the illusion that is some kind of social justice or protest, that's anarchy. And most Americans will acknowledge that the right to protest is sacred, right? That freedom of speech is sacred. So we can't get it lost that, okay, well, you can't protest. We all support that, but it does not allow you then to go loot Apple stores and break curbs and throw boulders at cops and Molotov cocktails. So I think there's just a crossing the line that I'm witnessing, and I wish more people would denounce it because it's it just kind of spoils it for the people that are maybe actually there for the right reasons. Even though I disagree with what they're protesting, we'll lay our life on the line to make sure they preserve the right to do that. So when the bad actors come out and start doing the thing, it's really disappointing. But even more disappointing is when certain sides on the political aisle will not denounce those actions. You know what I mean? So that's my take on it. Well, it's one of those things, man, not to get too political, but if you know the rules, and you break the rules when you finally are held to that. You can't act like you're surprised.
Yeah.
If I were to sneak into some country in Europe or wherever else and try to act like I live there, and all of a sudden they caught me and they sent me back to the United States, I wouldn't be like, oh, this is crazy. Like, how could you do that to me? I'd say, you know what? I knew this could happen because I'm the one that did it in the first place. Right.
Exactly.
And if you're dumb enough, and I don't say dumb, and I want to be a little sensitive, but if you're willing to take your whole family to a place that won't sanction you, well, that's on you, man. You know what I mean? Like, never in a million years would I think I'm going to uproot my family and take them to a place that literally in 2 years could literally send us home. And but I also acknowledge, man, in a way, I can respect people trying to pursue a better life.
Yes.
And I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that come here as immigrants that work their fucking asses off.
Yeah, dude.
And they are actually trying to pursue the American dream as well. So part of that, I have mad respect, man. And so to me, I get torn a little bit in two different directions,
Absolutely.
depending on kind of what emotions I'm feeling. But again, it is complicated. But anarchy should never be sanctioned, and we should be able to use the full extent of the law to hold those people accountable. So if we got to bring in the National Guard, like, that's not some flex. That's to make sure buildings don't get burned to the ground like they've had before. Right. So yeah, kind of long-winded there, but that's my unsolicited take on that.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be long-winded because I think you're hitting on the new N word, which is nuance. Like, these things are complicated, but you're so right. There's a big difference between protesting and rioting. And what's going on right now is just turned into a straight up chaos, and it's a riot. And that's just not, it's not cool. And to your point, and speaking as a legal immigrant, like, I went through this process years ago, and thousands of dollars and all of this, the waiting around and doing it the right way. And then you see, like, the anger that's going on right now when you've tried to play the system a little bit. And the kids say these days, fuck around and you find out. And right now we're in the finding out phase. And it sucks that it has to get this way. But I think, the reason I wanted to ask you about that in particular is it's easy for me to sit here because I haven't necessarily fought for this country. It's not in my blood. I haven't risked it all on the line. I haven't spent time in the Middle East, particularly as a SEAL. So it's always interesting to get the perspectives of people that have put their life on the line for the country, that have actually been willing to lay down everything to say, I'll even defend your right to say stupid shit because that's what we stand for. And I'm willing to risk it all for that. So it's really interesting to get that perspective, man. And yeah, I appreciate you being able to kind of lay it all out because it is complicated.
Yeah, and I think I think about this, there's got to be a way. We got a lot of smart people in this country that we can figure out a system that the people that are highly motivated, that are will contribute to society and be good humans. Like, there has to be a pathway, and you're an example of that. But how do we get that poor family that is coming up from Mexico that literally, I'll give you an example. I had some work getting done around my house, and I had a contractor. He was running it, but his crew was a group of Mexican guys, and they got up there at 7:00 every morning. When I got home from work at 5:30, they were still working. They're eating lunch out of a cooler. And they were leaving at 8:00 at night every night. And I was like, you know what? I respect that, because those guys are out there working for their family. And while they might not be here legally, like, that mentality, that's the American spirit, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you harness that in a way that does it fairly? But you have to have rules, because if you just say, all right, everyone's good, then the bad actors come in, the social programs get overwhelmed. So there does need to be a structure. You can't just be like, oh, everyone's great, just we'll figure it out. So I just use that as an example. That's kind of the human side that I see, but there's a dark underbelly there. You have the cartels bringing people in. They're getting their teeth sunk into these cities and disrupting it and doing all kinds of crime, because those guys don't give a shit about breaking the law. That's the thing, man. It's like they see our prison system and they're like, that's the Taj Mahal. If I get caught, who cares? Think about it. They laugh at our prisons, right? You think a prison down in Honduras versus an American prison, there's no deterrent because they don't care. You know what I mean? So anyway, I digress, but we'll see. Hopefully we can figure it out.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I want to speak to your history in the SEALs a little bit. And as a past military member, I'm curious first and foremost about why SEALs make such good leaders. So you've got yourself as the CEO of an awesome company, Born Primitive, but you've got other massive figures in this space now, like Jocko Willink, for example, known for leadership. What do you think makes SEALs special? What do you think makes them great leaders?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I'm not sure I'm worthy of that, but if we're going to make the assumption that I am, I think one thing that we learn through the process of becoming a SEAL and just being in the SEAL teams is, you're taught how to lead, but first you're taught how to follow. You know what I mean? And that's a huge part of it. Obviously in the military, it's very structured. There's a very clear chain of command. You know exactly where you stand in the pecking order. So for most of your time, you are actually, answering to someone, even at the highest level, until you get to the top, you have a boss. So I think it's that balance of learning, when to lead when you're in charge of your guys, whether it's as small as a fire team or a squad or a platoon or a troop as it gets bigger and bigger. While also, being a good follower and being a good sled dog and pulling your weight for the team. And I just think, the culture that is instilled, it's pretty cutthroat, man. In a really good way, though. There is a standard that's held, and there's incredible amount of peer pressure that if you don't uphold the standard, pardon my French, but you can get the fuck out, right? If you're going to show up to work and you're not fit, you don't have your gear squared away, you don't have the right mindset, then you don't belong, and you will be outcasted quickly by your peers. In the civilian workplace, that wouldn't fly. You can't.
Right.
But it's like the Lord of the Flies, man. Particularly going through the training buds, it is absolutely Lord of the Flies. Anything goes. They're taking classes from 200 plus guys down to in my case we had 11 originals. We graduated 26 by the end of it. So like they thin the herd real quick. So it kind of has to be that way. But once you get into a unit, the standard that the guys above you hold you to, they're like the gatekeepers of the standard, and that just creates an incredible culture. And in some cases, you're almost fearful that you don't want to be seen as the guy that's not fit or not reliable or not competent with his weapon, whatever that is. So you put in the extra work to make sure that, all right, I want, when they look across the table, I want them to know me as a reliable guy that's putting in the work. So I just think being a part of that culture helps you apply that to other things. Now, I will say there's a drawback to it, because one of the things I had to learn once I became full-time CEO and I wasn't in the military anymore is like, you have to conform a little bit to the civilian population and not run it like it's a SEAL platoon, because the expectation is a little different. You have people that have different personalities, whereas in the teams, it's we're all kind of wired the same. So it's not a one size fits all. You can't hold them to the same kind of ridiculous standard that you held your teammates to, because this isn't, a life or death type thing. For us, we're selling apparel, right? Yeah, we're not, it doesn't have to be that intense. So I had to rewire some of those methods, but I think the underlying themes and principles still apply.
Yeah, very cool, man. I'm very curious about this, for want of a better term, like Burr's holistic arc evolution. You're all like guns, guts, and glory, and you still have that, but becoming a father, becoming more of a well-rounded human, stepping out of that. And that's certainly something I want to get in with you today, but not to gloss over the training that you mentioned about. And I just want to ask you, what's Buds really like? Because we get the stories through social media, and it's almost a little bit romanticized, you know what I mean? And I just know the reality of it is so much different than the outside perspective of, like, I think hard charging guys like myself always feel like they want a secret crack at that just to see if it would break them. But in the reality, I think, hell no, I don't really want that. So what's Buds really like?
Well, in its simplest form, it really sucks. I think, what was alarming for me is, when I showed up on the first day, in the first couple of weeks, you have like it's called indoctrination, where you kind of just, you get familiar with the different things you're going to be doing, but it's still hard. Like it's definitely not like training wheels. It may be a little bit, but it's still, you're in it. And then, after about 3 weeks, it officially kicks off. So, when you show up day one, everyone's kind of sizing each other up. Now, the enlisted guys had all just done boot camp together, so they all know each other, but I was an officer coming in, so I didn't know anyone. But on day one, I'm kind of looking around and I'm like, all right, statistically, 80% of these guys are going to be gone in a month. But where are they going to trim the fat? Because all these dudes I'm seeing, for the most part, look like hard charging, fit, motivated, tough guys. You know what I mean? And it was a little unsettling, because I'm like, man, like how, like
Right.
what is about to happen that I don't know about, that I may be miscalculating, and you start to get a little concerned. Now, I was pretty confident that I would make it, but that was still very unsettling.
Yeah.
And it really comes down, that you can't underestimate the psychological impact of being cold and wet and tired. It doesn't matter if you have a freaking 6-pack and run a 5-minute mile when it's 2 o'clock in the morning in the Pacific Ocean, in the water's 54 degrees and you're borderline hypothermic, and you're doing all these other horrible things. The tendency to take an off ramp becomes very appealing. And that's
Oh yeah.
something, when I have guys that come talk to me that are younger guys that are going in, I try to use this analogy is like, if you have a backup plan in your mind, even if it's tucked away into the depths of your subconscious, I promise you it will come out. I promise you, because you know what I mean? You're going to say, oh, that off ramp is, in that moment of weakness, you're going to see, all right, I'll go back to that family business, and oh, my
Mm,
parents will still be proud of me, and oh, I could go back to that 9 to 5 I was where, oh, it'll be okay, or oh, I'll go to the fleet, it can't be as bad as this. And that gets guys, and you have to eliminate that off ramp. This is what we're doing. It doesn't mean it doesn't suck any less, but this is just what we're doing, and it's that simple.
yeah.
And I had really repped that ahead of time in my mind of, okay, when it gets hard, this is a no fail mission, and do not allow those little thoughts to creep in, because once they do, you're dead in the water. You're
Mm,
done. And most of the guys didn't have the ability to do that. And these are guys that have been training 3, 4, 5 years. Some of them have been thinking about it since they were little. And you're 4 days in and you're already quitting. You know what I mean? But it's that bad. You know what I mean? It's it's in order to get an attrition rate that high, it has to be nuts.
yes. Well, it
Um,
has to be, right? Because you're not trying to get everybody through here, because you need a particular kind of savage on the at the end of that, because there has to be a very hard charging guy that's willing to persevere because of the potential risk of the job of what you're going to put yourself into. And I think that's just something that I heard you talk about, which was really interesting for me, is how going through that you would use this kind of perspective switch where you said something along the time of, when it's really hard and you feel like you want to quit, focus on other people, help other
Mhm.
people. Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I that's kind of a little mind trick there. Is because when things really get bad and you focus around others around you, you forget about your own pain. And that's actually something you can use in your own life. That doesn't need to be when you're running under a boat in SEAL training.
That's right.
If you're in a rut and maybe your mental health is suffering, hey, reach out to a buddy and check in on them and say, hey, how you been, man? And if he's going through a hard time, measure how you feel when you get on the phone with him for 45 minutes and you're talking him through his stuff and encouraging him. For that 45 minutes, you just forgot about your own pain.
Mm,
And in a way, you're coaching yourself. You know what I mean? If you're telling, hey, man, it's going to be okay, there's brighter days ahead. You know what I mean? And, focus on the basics, try to get your fitness under control, get good sleep, nutrition. You literally just provided a mirror for what you need to be doing in that moment. And so I think, that's something that I used in training when things were really bad. And the cool thing is they were doing the same thing to me. The
yeah.
guys were checking in on me at the same time. Hey man, how you doing? You doing okay? You're locked up in the surf zone, shivering your butts off and hypothermic. Hey buddy, you doing okay? By me checking on him to my left and right, like that helped me in that moment too.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a psychologist, but there's something at a deep level that is happening there that makes that a little bit easier. And I think
Yeah.
there's takeaways in everyday life where that could be used.
Yeah. I've been using it in the research for this episode. I heard you see that, and my mini kind of squeeze point every day is going to a 5 a.m. CrossFit class. And I train with some savages down here at CrossFit Mayhem. So it gets hard. It doesn't get buds hard, but it gets hard. You're in the pain cave. You understand the CrossFit world well. But I've been trying to do this, kind of pull myself out of the murky subjective experience of how much this sucks and how long's left on the clock. And oh no, we've got 2 more rounds, and focus it externally on the other guys, and just even being playful with it. Like, hey guys, smile. It sucks less when we're having fun, or you're going to be okay. All of that stuff. And I actually know exactly what you're talking about. It just takes your sense of awareness off yourself for a moment so you can find some reprieve. And then, yep, the clock hits, or, the wave comes in again and it crashes over you, and you got to pull your head above the water and refocus. And I think that was very, very valuable. And, to your point about just this, how buds can break people, I think that as men, at least, I think that's probably one of our biggest fears is, are we really a coward? because we never really put ourselves like on the line, truly on the hook. So it's easy for me to weasel my way out of a workout, for example. But when it's something that's serious, like, and you're really testing, you're brought to your very, very edge, I guess the question, the open loop for all of us is, am I a quitter when it gets that hard? Okay, great. I can push through a 30-minute EMOM. I can do a Murph, and all of these things are really challenging. But what if it gets to that next level? And I think that's a really cool testament to, just who you are and the special kind of savages that survive buds and get through it. That there's just a lot of respect from the culture and from men in particular, because we know that you're the kind of person that doesn't quit even when it gets disproportionately hard.
Yeah, and I think something to add that you've probably heard before is like, you just have to break it up into bite-sized pieces, man. And that, again, that's a something that is applicable to life as well. And we would say, you might have heard, like, just make it to the next meal. I mean,
Yeah.
It maybe even you break it down even less than that. All right, I'm trying to, when we're running, I want to make it to that next light post that's 80 yards away, and then I'm resetting my brain.
Yeah.
And I'm picking another thing, and I'm resetting my brain, and you can pare it down as little as you need to, because the guys that thought, at the end of day one, all right, I'm going to be doing this for the next 19 months or whatever the full, so I don't know the full timeline now. I think it's about that. If you make it through unscathed with buds and SQT, they get to the back to the room at midnight at the end of day one, licking their wound, already limping. And they say, there's no way I can do this for 19 months.
Yeah.
And they quit the next morning. And it's like, yeah, dude, because you're thinking about 19 months. Think about just the 5 a.m. 4-mile ocean or pack sand run we have to do at 5 a.m. That's all you're focusing on right now. And then when that's done, it's the 3-hour log PT that we're doing on the O course. Okay. And then when that's done, we're going to the pool deck and we're going to get, basically drowned for a couple hours. All right. That's all you're focusing. You have to get tunnel vision on the task, and in the mind will get overwhelmed if you zoom out and look at what has to get accomplished. And that again, that's true with anything. That's true if you're starting up a business and you look at all the different things you got to do to get it started, or maybe you're trying to get fit again and you're 80 pounds overweight. Don't worry about the 6 months in the gym. Focus on that first workout, and that's it. Tunnel vision honed in, and that's all you're worried about, because your mind it can't do it. It can be weak and it'll overwhelm you, and then you'll end up just throwing in the towel.
Mm-hmm. Well said. How much did your fitness journey help with this? I know, like, as you were going through training and this desire to become a SEAL, you were also getting really big in the CrossFit space, competing to a high level and really developing, another alternative form of fitness as well. And I know that that's where the inception of Born Primitive, that seed, was planted. So take me on that journey a little bit about the CrossFit journey, and then how that, has just been a big part of your life, and also how it was the inception of Born Primitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a great foundation of fitness to have for that style of training. I got introduced to CrossFit because I was in Indianapolis and I was training with some guys that were going into the program as well. And a couple of them, we would always meet at the track in the mornings, and running was my big nemesis. I was a college football linebacker, so I was a big meathead. I could run pretty fast short distances, but like, you to have me run over a 400 and I'm sucking wind, right? So we're doing these track workouts, and I was, getting a little faster, but these guys were just way ahead of me. And I just realized their cardio capacity was just so much better. So one of the guys, I was like, hey man, what are you doing at night to train? Cause I would just go to the YMCA and do push-ups and pull-ups and things like that. And he was going to a CrossFit gym at night. And I didn't know what CrossFit was. And he said, hey, you should come over. It's really cool. Check it out. So I walked into the CrossFit gym that night, and they were doing the first, I think it was 12.1. It was either 12.1 or 13.1. It was the CrossFit Open.
Yeah.
I, of course, had no idea what that was. And this was a gym that was like in Indianapolis, at CrossFit Indy North. It's called Three Kings now. Was like a big time gym in that area, super competitive. So I walk in, and they're about to start like the 5:30 p.m. heat workout one of the Open. Like, that's a big moment, especially back in the day. The whole gym would come out, people would be screaming, the heats were on the board. I mean, it was high energy stuff. So I walk in and I see this, and I'm like, these are my people. These people are maniacs. How did I not know about this? I convinced the Bryn, the owner. I said, hey man, it was snatches. It was like, I think it was 65 pounds for 30 reps. Then it goes to 95, and then 135, 165. I said, hey, I'm not a CrossFitter, but I know how to snatch from, playing college football. We did that movement. Could I just jump in like the next heat? So he was like, yeah, get loose. So that was my first moment in CrossFit, was that first Open. And then, so we did it for 5 weeks, right? And then I come in the 6th week and I'm like, well, hey, when's when's the next one? And they all laugh. They're like, oh, no, that's not every week. This is like 5 weeks out of the year. I thought that was like every week we do
Yeah,
that. I'm
right.
like, this is sick. Like, so that was kind of funny. But long story short, I started training CrossFit and I started training with their competition team on the weekends as just like an extra body they needed. And then, as I started to learn the skills, they were kind of like, well, hey, you might be able to make the team. We go to this thing called regionals.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up making it to regionals. We got second, so we punched our ticket to the games and got to compete in the games my first
That's
year doing
awesome.
CrossFit. So that really exposed me to, I think, a better level of fitness, especially coming from a college football background. It's short bursts, explosive power, but that does not translate to a long beach run,
That's
after
right.
you run a couple 100 miles during Hell Week or something like that. So I had to modify it for sure. I definitely still think I went through buds too big. I was about
Mm,
235 pounds.
mm.
So that is not good for that kind of training. I think had I been 205, I would have had a much more pleasant experience. But durability, I think it helped me on that side because I think I was able to hold up longer just from the kind of the rigorous training that CrossFit, is all about.
Absolutely. At this phase in life right now, what do you train for when you don't have a sports goal or a mission anymore?
A few different things, and it's kind of adapting as we speak. I think longevity is huge now. I'm realizing that the joints, the aches and pains are increasing, and I'm
Yeah.
37, so I think it's a little early to be feeling that. But given my background, as a middle linebacker in college, and then being in the teams, I kind of set myself up for that kind of aches and pains. So I think longevity is important. So on some movements, I'm lowering the weight. I don't need to be back squatting 405 anymore. I don't need to flex 315 is just fine for a set of five. Like I
Yeah.
don't really need you know what I mean? Like that's more than enough.
Yeah.
So I've had to check the ego a little bit and do a little bit more stuff with mobility and warm up and things like that. So I think longevity is one, I would say in equal priority for me now. I don't have a sport to play anymore. I don't have, a platoon that is relying on me to do my job. So for me, it'll sound a little silly. I really the only thing I think about when I train, as far as justifying it, is if a conflict were to ensue, do I have the physical ability to protect
Mm,
those around me, right?
mm.
And do I have the stamina in the gas tank to have sustained violence more than 30 seconds,
Yep.
right? And it's ridiculous, but okay. What about a multiple attacker scenario? What if it's three
Yeah.
dudes, right? And none of them train. Well, the first 30 seconds they're going to be at 100%, but after that, their gas tank is going to go off a cliff. If I'm ready for that moment, maybe there's a scenario where I prevail in that this is of course worst case. It's probably never going to
That's
happen.
right.
But
Yeah.
what if I'm at the gas pump and I got my daughter in the car seat in the back and they don't know it and they're trying to carjack me, right? And now I got to throw hands with three different guys that think they're going to get one on me, right? I'm preparing for those unforeseen moments that will probably never happen. Or maybe an old lady's getting jumped in the parking lot at the
Yeah.
grocery store, and it's two guys, and I got to roll up on them, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's to me where again, it probably will never happen, but that's how I now justify my training when it gets really hard. I go
Yeah.
to those moments when it's the fifth round of a rounds for time and I'm in the pain cave, or it's the last round. And, and even it's a ridiculous because, I used to go there because, all right, I'm a football player, or, hey, I'm in a platoon.
Mm.
I got to be fit. I don't have a silly justification anymore. So that's what I do. More just the protector mindset. And some might laugh at that, but it works for me. It gets me going. And the last, you just want to look good. You know what I mean? I do
Yeah,
want to,
exactly.
I do want to look
Yeah.
good and be a little bit harder to kill at the end of the day. So that's what I'm trying to maintain.
I love it, man. It reminds me of Mark Bell's strength is never a weakness and weakness is never a strength. And I'm glad you said that actually, because it makes me feel like a little bit less of a psycho, because when I've been in some deep workouts recently, I have to invoke this vision of, God forbid, one day I have to run across a field carrying my two kids or, help my wife. And these are the places that you have to go, because I'm in the same boat. I'm not training for anything right now other than to be a rad dad and to be able to be useful. There's this idea that you should be dangerous but not a danger.
Uh-huh.
This idea that you should be willing and capable of being a very dangerous human. God forbid you ever need it, But to have that gives you a sense of calm and confidence, and especially as a dad and dad to a girl and a leader of a company, that I think that grants people around you a real sense of calm. Like, and I've been in MMA gyms for most of my adult life, competing in that to a pretty high level. So certified killers in that realm, they could choke you unconscious, break your arm, whatever. Nicest guys, because they've battle tested themselves in the arena, so to speak. And I think there's something really valuable about that. And I agree, man. Be dangerous, not a danger. Strength is never a weakness, and weakness is never a strength.
Absolutely. Yeah. The martial arts community, that's the perfect embodiment of that mentality, right? You got if you're walking, you see that cauliflower ear, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just stay away. Cause
Stay away.
that's the one giveaway. Otherwise you might never know.
What's crazy about it now, man, as well, is because of the rise and popularity of that sport, these are often very unassuming folks as well. You know what I mean? This could be the 24-year-old computer programmer who is a black belt of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a Muay Thai striking genius. And I don't know, you get a little bit of that, boisterousness about you. You better calm down and sit down, boy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have experienced that enough to know better.
Yeah.
That because I did like a combatives symposium in Denmark where they brought in these different special operations guys from different countries, and we all met for, I think it was a 2-week course, and they had a bunch of black belts helping instruct, and we had a gold glove boxer and a Muay Thai pro, and all these guys just facilitating different types of MMA. And one of the main instructors, I think he actually trains, he does John Wick stuff and Zuckerberg
Yeah,
and
right
Dave
on.
Camarillo. But Dave was the main instructor, and he's an awesome dude. I haven't talked to him in a while, but we were doing a marathon roll where I think you do 5-minute rounds, and then you rotate. You just find the next partner, and you do 10 rounds. It was a lot of fun. But I got paired up with Dave, and Dave's probably $170, but he's like and I don't know all the belts, but he's like a 5th degree black.
He's got them all.
The dude is unreal. So me being the 250-pound team guy, delusionally thinking that maybe I can get him, I shoot like a double leg on him. It was like a blast double. Like I just buried my head. I scooped him up, and as I'm going to the ground, I'm like, man, I might have him. Literally, as this is happening, he totally let me do it. And by the time I landed, within a half second, this is all transpired. He has me in some leg lock as we hit the mat, and I immediately tapped, and I
Oh, yeah.
was like, holy, what the hell was that? And that makes you realize there are levels, and I am nowhere near that. But I think it's awesome that guys and girls are getting in on the mats and learning those things,
Yeah.
because that could be a life or death, especially for the ladies. You know what I mean? Maybe a scenario where some guy is trying to sexually assault them.
Yeah.
They know a few things on the ground. That guy could be in a world of hurt. You know what I
Oh,
mean? A triangle choke, and he's night, right?
Oh
So,
yeah, man. There was a viral video that went around a couple of years ago. Some guy in Brazil snuck up on this woman. He didn't know she was a UFC fighter. She beat the shit out of him, bro. He was trying to sexually assault her. She wrapped him in a triangle. She was just elbowing his head, punching him, knocked him unconscious until the police arrived. And it's a real world skill, And again, I think it grants that peace and confidence that comes with, we're not looking for trouble. But if trouble finds us, at least we know we've done the requisite training to be like, I've given myself the best shot here, because if you're going to end up shit creek, you certainly want to paddle,
there you go. I love that. Good analogy.
Yeah, dude. So talk to me about the arc from SEALs to CEO, like quite a transformation. But this was all happening kind of in conjunction, right? These worlds were merging. There was the training, there was the SEALs, there was the CrossFit, there was the Born Primitive, because you were bashing your pubic bone on snatches, and then this idea turned into something. So it's all kind of like building at the same time. Now this phase of life, you're fully behind the brand Born Primitive and as a CEO. But tell me a little bit about the story there and what's transpired since.
Yeah, so we actually started it officially a few months before I went to officer candidate school. So I went to OCS in June of 2014. We incorporated Born Primitive March of that year. Now, we had been working on it for well before we officially incorporated. I guess I didn't know any better. I would say I wouldn't advise starting a company right before you join the military. It doesn't really work. It doesn't really work logistically all that great. But fortunately, I was dumb enough and maybe a little overly motivated.
Yeah.
That started as just a super niche thing. It was a pair of compression shorts for Olympic lifters that I was going to make one of one. It was just a prototype for myself, and some guys at the gym convinced me to make a couple hundred units. and that's what got the ball rolling. Mallory, our co-founder, who, we were married at the time, and we still run the business together. We're on great terms, and she is an absolute savage herself. We kind of started it. She was a dental hygienist, and eventually she kind of came on pretty quickly full time. And while I was at OCS and going through SEAL training, she was doing most of it. But for my entire time active duty, I was doing both. So,
Wow.
every bit of leave or, vacation for the civilian term, I was using it to go work Born Primitive events. So we would go to all the regionals, we would go to the CrossFit games, we'd go to local competitions on the weekends. Um, so it definitely took an incredible effort. It was not something, I don't know if I would have the gas tank to do it again. But I was young and I was motivated. And at the time, that's the time to, I think, take chances in your life. On that risk continuum, I would say you should land a little bit on the riskier
Yeah.
side, because if you screw it up, chalk it up and re-engage, and you're
Yeah.
going to be fine. So we took that approach, and little by little just bootstrapped the whole thing. We never took on outside capital. We were able to double the business every year for the first 8 years. And
Wow.
then, hitting that 100% growth gets a little harder once you're in the, mid 8-figure range, but we still continue to do good things with the company. And now we're year 11, and finally I'm able to be full time, and, it's fun, but I will say this. I go speak at entrepreneurial panels occasionally, and I always try to lay out, hey, be careful what you wish for. uh,
Mm.
the startup entrepreneurial journey is a lonely, hard road, and it's not this glorified, sexy thing that maybe you see on Instagram, or the 0.001% that has $1 billion exit. Like, it's not like that for most. I think eight
Right.
percent of startups fail, or 8% actually make it. And it's in the beginning you do everything, and ultimately that took a toll on our marriage,
Mm.
because we were so both type A, so motivated that any waking second I was in the SEAL team doing that thing, we were like all in Born Primitive, right? And we never had time to be husband and wife. So it definitely brought some collateral damage. We've worked through it. We're on great terms. She's remarried with two beautiful kids now, and I have a child of my own. But yeah, that was part of the journey, part of what you pay for. If you want to be exceptional in anything, you got to be a little bit nuts, and we both were. And we have something to show for it now, but it definitely didn't come without sacrifice.
Yeah, well said. I think yeah, in the over glamorized side of social media, you see a lot of the highlight reel, right? It's a lot of the polished stuff. It's especially with this younger crowd and e-commerce and stuff like that. It's rented Lamborghinis and penthouses in Miami, and it's not the real nitty-gritty, get your hands dirty, eat a lot of shit, don't know if you're going to make it, pressure, all of that stuff that's going on behind the scenes, to the point where even personal sacrifices enter the arena, like the loss of a marriage, the breakdown of that. And I guess in hindsight, you did the best that you could with the tools that you had, and I'm sure you don't regret it now, because it's all part of the amazing story. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than just a rad idea. You've got to be the kind of person. It's funny you mentioned the like 8% success rate is so it's even less likely that a business will work than you probably graduating buds, and that's probably a really good training for that, because I guess when the going got tough, at least you had this fortitude and this mental resilience to know that, hey, if I could do this thing, I could do this hard thing, then I can do this hard thing too. But to pick something up, you got to put something down, and there's trade-offs, man.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always think, like, man, if I had to go through training right now, and I had 6 months to prepare, would I make it? And could I do another startup from scratch? Now, I think the
Mm,
startup would be a lot easier, because I've used the analogy before too, where it's like, imagine you have to build a house for the first time, and you don't have any trade skills at all. And you have to watch YouTube videos for every component of the build, the foundation, the site work, the plumbing, the electrical, the HVAC, the roof, like all the
yeah,
framing. Imagine how difficult it would be to build a house from start to finish with zero experience. But okay, now you've made all the mistakes and you've worked out all the kinks. Now if you're building that second house, you know the ropes, right? And maybe now the plumber you're going to use, the
yeah,
electrician you're going to use, you have all your people, you have your tech stack on your site, you're immediately going to, sign up with Shopify, you're going to put this here, you're going to use. I think if I were to do it again, you could build something a lot quicker with a lot less headache.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe there's something in the future. But I'm all in on Born Primitive. I still got a lot of gas in the tank, and we're gonna keep this thing rolling as long as we can. Maybe even to the point where it could be a family business for our kids.
I love that.
So we'll see.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And one of the things we talked about, your patriotism, your uncompromising standards, is something you very much carry over into Born Primitive, and this idea of having that very long-term mindset of potentially setting this up forever, as a family business. What do you need to be aware of? How steadfast do you need to be in those beliefs and those kind of values? Because I guess as you grow, you start to get pressure from funding and things like that, right? Big money wants to come in and all that. How do you just stay true to your guns, be uncompromising? And have you been feeling any of that pressure in the growth journey?
A few years ago, there was some pressure. The values of our company, we love America, what it stands for. We acknowledge we're not perfect. It's not like it's we love America and
Yeah.
not acknowledging any of the things in our past. So I don't want that to get misconstrued, but to being proud of our country, what it stands for, supporting the men and women that serve our country, law enforcement, first responder communities, military, of course. Those are just values that were instilled in me and Mallory when we were brought up. So that just by nature became the ethos of the company. Because quite frankly, I'm not creative enough to create, a new set of ethos
Yeah.
that is some like alternate personality that's infused into the brand. The brand was literally just us.
Yeah.
We like to work out. We're gritty. We get after it. We're motivated. We love our country. Like there it is. It's just personified through Born Primitive. So in the beginning, it just was it wasn't really by design. It was just like, of course, this is how we're going to be because this is how we are. Where it got complicated is during BLM. We've always been staunch supporters of our first responders, and of course, within that is the law enforcement community. And we had donated a good amount of money up until that point to a charity that supports the families of fallen police officers. Think a little kid that just lost their dad. Like that's not a very controversial thing to be financially supporting an organization like that, right? So we had a Thin Blue Line collection, and it was something we did every year, and we would refresh the collection, and it really wasn't controversial at all, right? Well, when that rolled around, overnight, we start getting hate mail from people. People were DMing me personally. People were emailing our customer service. Our customer service team's coming to me and say, "Hey, what do you want me to say to this?"
Wow.
We had people saying, "You need to remove your Blue Line collection immediately, or we're never shopping Born Primitive again." I had owners of CrossFit gyms. I remember there was one in New York City. The owner of that gym DMing me when I'm at work in the SEAL teams saying, if you don't denounce this and this and this by within 24 hours, I'm banning you from my gym in New York. And if anyone walks in wearing Born Primitive, I'm going to ask them to leave. That's how much we lost our fucking minds. And it was really stressful because at that point we have, I don't know, 30 employees. And I'm thinking, okay, I have my own values, but I also need to make sure we protect the business. So, for a minute there, I was like, do I need to kind of sideline a little bit of my own beliefs to make sure that we don't get in the crosshairs of this cancel culture? Fortunately, I'm hard headed enough that lived in my brain for all of 3 seconds. And my response was eventually, no, we are who we are. We're proud of it. We acknowledge there's some things wrong with our country, but to alienate 1 million cops because of one event that happened, 2,000 miles from here, is not something I'm willing to do. And particularly when it started leading to cops getting killed. You had the thing in Dallas where I think 4 or 5 cops were ambushed. It was completely out of control. And everything they did was under a microscope. And you had guys running through alleyways brandishing a pistol and would get killed, and all of a sudden you'd have people rioting for that. It's like, what did you want that guy to do? So it got completely unhinged, and it was hard there for, I don't know, a year and a half. It really was stressful because the messages kept coming. The comments on Instagram, all of a sudden now I'm a bigot and somehow I'm racist, all the things. That'll rattle you a little bit, even if you're, I'm a very confident alpha male. Like if I'm rattled, imagine the person who's a little bit insecure that, they're fucked. That was the first point where we really got tested. And from that point forward, once the dust settled and we realized we were on the right side of that, we was, okay, we are never going to waver ever again. We are who we are, take it or leave it. There's plenty of other brands out there, especially in the fitness community, you got the Lululemons, you got the Athleta, all these cush brands that would love to have your business, but that is not how we roll. And and that's okay. And I think from just a pure marketing standpoint, I think there's a lesson to be learned here. Just remove the
Mm,
emotions, remove all that. From a tactical standpoint, if you're starting a company, you have to do that, because if you try to speak to everyone, you speak to no one, particularly in a space that's super crowded. Like a fitness apparel, that's the worst space you could possibly be
yeah.
in, because there are a million fitness apparel brands. There's no barrier to entry. So when you come in, you better be different. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And I think that's important. Unless you've invented a new product that's solving a unique need, or you're on the front end of like a new industry that has a huge tailwind, like the cold plunge phenomenon and all that. Like there's outliers where it doesn't really matter what your brand stands for. Like you can just have the deck stacked in your favor. But if you're coming into a competitive space, you better figure out who the hell you're going to be, and
yeah.
be okay with 50% of the people in that space being meh. That's not really my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually our secret sauce. When we get a private equity investment, hopefully in the next year and a half, that's our moat around our castle. That's what you
Mm,
can't replicate. Is 11 years of being true to who we are and the values that are now associated with the company. I could start a leggings brand tomorrow in 2 seconds with the contacts and the skill set that I have, but it won't be born primitive because it hasn't been personifying those things for so long and so consistently. But
yes.
now when people look at Born Primitive that have been with us for a while, they say, yep, they are as advertised. That is who they are. And they keep doing it. We just paid off in November on Veterans Day, $11 million in veteran medical bills.
Hmm. Hmm.
This isn't a punchline for us. We're actually doing it, and it means something to us. And over half of our employees right now are veterans, former first responders, or the spouses of those individuals. And that's not by design, but that's just how the DNA of our company is, and we try to live it. It's not just something making on a corporate spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. I think it's so refreshing. It reminds me when I was growing up in England, we had this brand of, I'm not going to sell it here, but it was a yeast spread called Marmite. And the whole tagline, my entire youth was, you either love it or you hate it. And that was it. It was very polarizing. And some people were like, heck yeah, I'm a Marmite guy. And other people were like, fuck no, I hate that stuff. But the more repulsive you come to the haters, the more magnetic you become to the people who are going to love it. And I think that there is an aspect of leadership, whether it's in a brand or even personally, leadership requires rejection to some degree. And you can see this with pick any leader, whether it's a figure even like Jesus Christ or a president. They're going to be so polarizing that they're going to be loved by a few, hated by a many, to the point where they might even be crucified in some instances. So you've got to be able to be steadfast. Like you said, the gaslighting that occurs through social media and culture kind of gets you thinking. You said for about 3 seconds, like, wait a minute, am I? No, fuck that. This is who I am, and I need to stand in that, because if you don't stand for that, you'll fall for anything. And I think to your point about many people getting lost in those changing winds and getting caught up in it because they weren't maybe as confident in themselves because they haven't done as much difficult things, or they're a bit younger and a bit more impressionable. That's very, very dangerous culturally, right? Because now you can control the narrative, sway people where you want. New to men, whether through social media and through our diet and through all of these things. And you don't have these rambunctious people that are proud to stand for the values, because let's be honest, those people are dangerous to a system that wants a lot of docile men that just like toe the line and do as they're told. Shut up and be good little boys and girls.
Absolutely. And you got to think while it's less so now, they were brilliant in setting up in a way where there was actually real consequences to being outspoken about certain of these viewpoints.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any one of them would shut you down in 2 seconds. And that, for people that are using social media for their business, has severe consequences, right? That's
Mm,
why all these influencers, like, you never heard them, rarely would they be talking about it, because they'd say, hey, I have my own viewpoints, but I'm not saying
yeah.
shit because I don't want to get, shadow banned. So it's like the system had created a huge deterrent. And what that did is it created the perception that the public opinion of these issues was uh, was very distorted. If you just looked at social media, you think, oh, everyone's against the cops and everyone, oh my God, I'm the mic. And then you start, am I going crazy?
Mm,
I'm a common sense guy. Like, why the heck does no one else think this? Well, It turns out that isn't the case. You talk to your neighbor, you talk to the person at the checkout at the grocery store, you talk to your buddy at the gym. No one actually thinks what you're seeing on social media,
So
but they
true.
create the perception of a prevailing public opinion, and it's actually the opposite, right? And then little by little, you start to figure out, hey, we're all getting played. Y'all are crazy, especially certain media outlets. They gaslight, they just blatantly lie. And then the Zuckerbergs of the world, that knucklehead that was running Twitter before Musk bought it. Any of the conservative or patriotic or any of these opinions, if you injected that, you're done, man.
Yeah.
So people took a knee and they say, all right, I'm just going to lay low. I'm just going to do my fitness influencer thing, but I better not say anything about, guns or COVID or whatever else. I better muzzle myself and just go with the flow.
Mm,
And there were a few renegades that had the balls to say, nope, you can all go with the herd, but we're going to go the other way. And little by little, people started joining that camp. And I think we've corrected now. And we have
yes.
to remember this in history because it's going to happen again. And hopefully this next time around, we're more strong-willed and we say, nah, you've already fooled us once. It's not going to happen again.
Yes, yes. That time was particularly crazy. The COVID and then the BLM movement. It felt like it was a test in many ways to see how far and I hate this like nefarious cloaked they, but like the institutionalized, corporatized media, they pushed a narrative and I mean they pushed a lot of control in terms of closing down beaches and you can't go out of your home and they push to see just how far the point was where they could push back. And I think very much to your point that if that ever happens again, we need to be very cautious of how much we let that pressure kind of sway us and realize that all of that stuff that we're talking about, by the way, it all occurred inside of our devices. It was on the screens and it was on the TV, but the real world experience was just mostly normal, sensible people that all mostly want the same thing. They want to kind of be left alone and they want some structure and infrastructure. But for the most part, like leave us alone. Most people are good. Most people are kind, but the very loud minority are very good at this game and they make a lot of noise and they break some shit and they burn some stuff. And you start thinking, wait a minute. Yeah. Is the whole world going crazy? But most of the time, you've got to just go outside and touch grass and remember to focus on yourself and your small communities. And most people are pretty aligned with that, I think.
Totally agree, man. Yeah, they do a good job at putting us against each other. And of course there's political disagreements and that's all good. Of course there's going to be, we all have different backgrounds and upbringings and viewpoints. But we need to make sure we don't forget that we are united in the end and we do all want the same thing for the most part. So I think that was very well said.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on this, and I really wanted to talk about this because I think it's very impressive what you're doing with the brand. That you said you paid off $10 million in veteran medical debt through Born Primitive. Why is medical debt one of the biggest silent killers of morale and hope amongst veterans?
Well, I think, obviously debt hurts everyone, not just veterans. So for this initiative, I wish we could have saved more. But we had to have a narrow scope of a specific audience. But I think, from what we learned, so this was all medical bills. A lot of the bills, because I actually spoke with a lot of the recipients and kind of asked, hey, like, how did that happen? How one guy had $183,000 in debt. He was a former Marine and got partially paralyzed and single dad of, I think of 3 kids. He had 183 grand in medical bills that he was never going to be able to pay off. And a lot of them, it was just because, some of them as simple as like they went to the wrong facility in an emergency and they didn't cover it, or they thought they were getting covered. And then like 2 months later, they get a $30,000 bill. And then you can't get through to the VA and you talk to 9 different people and they're rude to you, or they hang up after you've been on hold for 2 hours. And these, maybe it's a single mom that's already working 2 jobs. She doesn't have the time to just be calling people all day. So it was something we wanted to do that was definitely something very unique. It was actually ended up being 11 million in total. Over 6,000 veterans by Christmas had their bills completely paid off. But I don't know, in the veteran community, I will acknowledge some of us are knuckleheads about our money. There's definitely, a tendency, and I can joke about this because, I come from that community where, you have an E3 in the Navy who's, making 31 grand a year and he goes across the street at the used car dealership and buys a, $30,000 Camaro. That's a 25% interest rate. So there's definitely like bigger problems that need to get addressed, like as far as like just bad fiscal decisions. But the reason we wanted to do medical bills was because no one deliberately says, "Oh, I'm going to
Right.
run up a medical bill today." It's like, yeah, you got T-bone going to work, and now you have to relearn basic skills, and so that's why we thought it was just a really cool thing. And we're going to do it even bigger this year. We're partnering up with Black Rifle Coffee. As
Awesome.
soon as was done, I hit up Evan, their founder, and was like, "Hey, man, you guys should come in on this because they're veteran-owned company as well. Like, we could do an even bigger impact." So this year, our pledge is to do 25 million combined, and I
Wow.
hope it's even more than that. But we'll see. There's a lot of people that need help, and again, I wish it could. I'd love to extend this to first responders and go even beyond that. But this is the starting point. This is kind of the cornerstone of a new initiative that we're going to try to keep doing every single year.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I think it's really powerful. And, like you said, this is kind of just it's a big bucket, but it's only one of the buckets where people need help. Military veterans in particular are always highlighted as having a very high suicide rate because it's so hard to readjust to kind of civilian life after being out there. And I'm curious for other tools and you kind of having recent experiences here. I know you recently flew down to Jamaica to partake in a medicinal mushroom ceremony that was guided by healers, shamans, teachers, whatever the best terminology for that. Firstly, like, what was that like for you, and how much do you think that these tools could potentially help the veteran community with things like PTSD, healing, integrating, etc.?
I think it's incredible, man. I think it's life changing. I think in 5 years, hopefully this will be way more mainstream. I just had a gentleman by the name of Brian Hubbard on our podcast, who's been a pioneer and a trailblazer for plant medicine, and just helped get the Texas Ibogaine initiative approved in the
Mm,
Texas legislature to get that rolling. Got 50 million earmarked for funding for the
wow.
hopefully fast tracked FDA approval of that. But it is so good that the awareness is being raised. For anyone listening, who's never heard of plant medicine, never heard of psilocybin or ibogaine or ayahuasca, these are incredible things that can heal you in so many different ways. I went down there to Jamaica with 9 other SEALs, and we were down there for 6 days, did 2 psilocybin journeys. We call them hero doses. So it's
Hmm.
a pretty big dose. And some of the experiences can be very unpleasant, but it allows you to access a part of your subconscious that has been buried under layers and layers and layers, and allow you to rewire some thought patterns. And even things like addiction, PTSD. At the physiological level, there's things happening in the actual brain.
Right.
And it's not just all woo woo stuff. There's actually like a physiological component that a neurologist could better explain than me. That can heal things, and you reset some of your dopamine receptors, and for those that with addiction, getting rid of that desire to take heroin or all these other things that you can't get out of in most cases unless there's that hard reset or intervention. So it's incredible, man. We here at Born Primitive are trying to help contribute to that awareness, and use our platform to advance it even further. And I just can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be a mainstay. And I think, man, had this been mainstream 15 years ago, there'd be a lot less suicides, and a lot of lives would have been saved. And it's unfortunate because I think, big pharma, you got to look out for them. They created an opioid pandemic. They made a lot of money off of that. And then, I would imagine behind the scenes, they're hoping that this cure, gets stalled. And guess what? As soon as it becomes mainstream, they're going to shift seats and they're going to be the ones making it.
Yeah.
We just, that's probably for another time, and we can put our tinfoil hats on. But I think, we got to be a little bit careful as this gets rolled out, that the evil powers don't infiltrate and make it just a big profit thing again, and corrupt what it's intended to be. And that is,
Yeah.
a life-saving intervention and you don't need to be super screwed up, in my opinion, to, like, anyone can really benefit. Just be ready, because you're gonna
Oh
get
yeah.
some insights into some things that maybe you've been subconsciously blocking out for a while, and you cannot lie to the psilocybin. It will bring the truth out real quick.
Yeah, once it's in, it's buckle up. You know, you're gonna open the shutter doors. Like you said, I was 27 when I had my first journey in a very similar way, and you know, honestly, for once, for better term, it was truly life changing. And I didn't go in quote unquote too screwed up, or at least I wasn't aware that I was so screwed up, I should say, until you get shown things in this new perspective. And it just, for me, it shook the snow globe of my mind in so many different ways. It was the first moment up until that point in my life where I realized a lot of the beliefs that I was clinging to as a life raft, they weren't even mine. I'd just been enculturated. I'd been given them labels that I'd been handed. And that just happens, you know, it's like we're given a name as soon as we're born, and then we're given a religion, and we're given a country, all of these things. And then all of a sudden you have this wide expanse of like, oh, there's so much more agency that I have than I believed. And things that are no longer serving me, I can let go. I can rework in real time. I can heal. I've got a whole new perspective shift on what the world is, and why it exists, and what I can do in it. And that is just, like you said, it's profoundly, profoundly powerful. What would you say was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Ooh, it's a tough one, man. There were so many lessons that came out of it. Definitely strengthened my faith. I think that would be one. I think I had a strong faith going in. That's something the last couple of years I've really worked on and built that. But man, I mean, I had a divine
Yeah.
intervention during my first journey.
Yeah.
That was I can't even explain it, how surreal and how incredible that was. It was very bad during the moment, but also in a way, uh, I met God basically,
Hmm.
literally there, and the music changed and the light got brighter and all these other things happened. That was not a coincidence. So
Yeah.
it reaffirmed my belief in a higher power, and that's very common, as you know, with these journeys. There's people that aren't religious at all and they get out of that and they say, man, there is a higher power, because I just
Yes.
met it. You know what I mean? I felt it. It became a part of me. So that's probably maybe the biggest one. But I think just, giving yourself permission to feel joy.
Mm.
And For me, I've always been, for whatever reason, like, felt like I needed to be just a hyper achiever, and of course that's good in many ways. You end up getting straight A's and you be a good athlete, and like these things that lead to like quote unquote success in your life. But you have to be able to feel happiness and joy in the moment. You can't always be kicking the can down the road. Okay, as soon as
Well
I
said.
accomplish that, then I'm happy. As soon as we move into that bigger house and have a bigger yard, then we'll be happy. As soon as I have X amount of money in the bank, then I'm happy. You're chasing an illusion that's never going to happen. You're going to get to 70 years old and you're finally going to realize it. And you can say, okay,
Yeah.
why when I was 37 was I not enjoying the moment? Why was I so obsessed with achieving business success and all these other things that keep me up at night? So I think it kind of rattled my foundation a little bit of, okay, you have been a hyper achiever your whole life, but hey, be careful, right? Because now you're 37 and you keep thinking that thing is just in front of you and
Mm.
you're almost there. If I just work hard for 2 more years, if I just do that private equity deal and get all this money in the bank, then I can finally chill. But you're not going to chill because that's how you're wired. So change your approach and making sure you experience joy in the moment. And just being a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more at peace with, hey, whatever is going
Mhm.
to happen is going to happen. And there was all kinds of other little lessons
Yeah.
interspersed in that, but I think those were the biggest takeaways for me. And just maybe a bit more empathetic too. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people experience more empathy towards other humans when they're done with an experience like that. And not to say I was some cold blooded dude before, but definitely trying to see other people's perspective. An example might be, let's say someone cuts me off in traffic, coming to Born Primitive today. Normally I would get really mad and want to, like, flick this guy off, in the rear view, and like, but hey, maybe that guy just got really bad news.
That's
Maybe
right.
he's late and maybe he had a big fight with his spouse this morning and his kid was up all night with the fever. And so he got an hour of sleep and now his boss is busting his balls because he's late, and he had a flat tire, whatever that is. And if you know that context, okay, dude, yeah, you cut me off, all good. I don't need to get fired up. Right. So
Yeah.
I think it allows you to, use that lens a little bit more. I'm still working on it. As you have to constantly integrate it before it kind of becomes like a kind of a permanent thought pattern. But those are positive things that I think just have made me a little bit happier, a little bit more at peace with whatever's going to happen.
Yeah. That's a very big one, man. I always think about this quote I heard once, that Success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. And I think so often, like, we can be really bloody successful and we got what we wanted. We got a certain salary or a certain insert whatever moniker of I'll be happy when syndrome it is. Apologies on that, mate. One of my kids' fire trucks just started to sing a song, so I had to mute as it was going.
Love it, dude. I get it. Trust me,
Yeah.
I get it.
Let me try and rehash that thought real quick. Yeah, it makes me think of this quote that I've heard in the past that has always stuck with me: that success is getting what you want, and happiness is wanting what you get. And we can pursue all kinds of success, and we can get it, whether it's the money or a title, insert whatever moniker of "I'll be happy when" syndrome it is. But are we actually happy with what we got? And I think these little, seemingly trite realizations of, hey, enjoy the moment, enjoy the passing of time, breathe a little bit, relax, stop rushing, stop kicking the can down the road. Like, the golden years are now, they're right in front of you. It seems so simple, but it's very, very hard because a lot of us just miss that. So I think those are really cool reminders, man, and very good to hear from somebody that has had a lot of success too. That, that it's always that case, you have to learn these the hard way sometimes, that money won't buy you happiness and all of these things. We think, well, maybe if I had the money, it would buy me happiness. But a lot of the same realizations are true, that like joy is to be found in the present moment, in the quote unquote mundane things. They're actually the really special things. Just the ability to slip a slow cup of coffee with your loved one in the morning, or hang out with your daughter, or hang out with your kids. Like, those are really the magical moments.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest danger is just with our electronics, man.
Yes.
We don't understand that those things are designed with the same psychology of a slot machine, of a casino floor, to literally keep. You look at Instagram. Literally, they took the components of a slot machine and applied it to our feed. You got the lateral, you got the scroll, you got the little icons, the little dings, the little that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's very smart people that are designing these things to keep you on these platforms, and you become literally addicted. They're strong-willed individuals. Like, I would consider myself one of them, that like it still hooks its teeth into me.
Yeah.
We have to break the cycle. I actually just installed an app that doesn't allow me to get an Instagram or any social apps, and you can set parameters. So I do 9 to 5, and then it'll like make me do a couple extra clicks after hours. And you look, it's like, man, what a waste of time that doesn't add any value to my life. And I think what it ends up causing is this dopamine desire, that's cheap dopamine, but it doesn't allow you to ever be still, right?
Yes.
Even if I'm now watching a movie on the couch and by myself, which is rare, but let's say my daughter's asleep and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna finally watch that one movie I wanted to watch. It's hard for me to sit down and watch a 2-hour movie without picking up my phone and checking it. It's like, how alarming is that? That even in it's something that should have me captive, so let alone sitting out on the back deck and drinking a cup of coffee and just being still and journaling and thinking your thoughts. Like, now it's even harder because like that's not as entertaining. So I think as a culture, we all need to realize what's happening and try to get some of that back. Because when we were kids and it's just a landline and there was nothing else to do, and there's, what I mean? There's not Netflix, of course, there's TV, and we did have video games, of course, and we spent, but not to the extent, we're out riding our bikes and scraping our knees and doing stuff like that. So particularly as fathers with our kids, we got to be crazy careful. Because if, people like us at our age are getting addicted to it, how are you going to expect a 5-year-old to have the maturity to not fall into that trap? And as parents, it's the easy button, right? To give them that tablet so you can do the dishes and vacuum and do whatever you got to do. So I just think it's something we need to flag as a society and start rewiring how we approach those. Easier said than done, though, of course, because how it's
easier said than done, man. Yeah. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with this, but easy choices, hard life, harder choices, easier life, right? It's the easy choice to give your kids the electronic babysitter so you can find some peace, but that's going to create the harder life for them because they're not going to be able to emotionally regulate. And for you, because now you're going to be dealing with a kid that can't sleep and is having a tantrum and doesn't know how to regulate themselves. Or the easy choices, whether it's you just scrolling and numbing in the scroll hole for 4 hours at night and get your ass to sleep so you can get up and do something productive in the morning. But this is a cultural thing that I think we are going to be rehabbing from in a pretty profound way, unless we pull our heads out of our butts and maybe that's the next conversation, man, because I feel like we could do this for a lot longer, but you're a busy guy and we got to get you out of here. So tell the people where they can go to, just keep up with the brand and what you're doing.
Yeah, we're at bornprimitive.com. We're an apparel brand. We got fitness apparel, athleisure, tactical outdoor, workout shoes, all kinds of stuff, flannels, jeans. So if you're in the market for some new gear, check us out. And then all the normal social handles, Born Primitive. And then I'm at Bear Handlon on Instagram. I'm not really a big Instagram guy, but that's where you can find me. And thanks so much for the conversation, and thanks for having me. And hopefully, people get some value out of this.
I think they will, my friend. Thank you very much. And you lot, we'll see you next week. Stay radical. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.